Guarding yourself against emotional manipulation is the key. So first you have to know what it is, why it happens, and why you are falling victim to these types of behaviors. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's jump in it.
Check it out.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Positivity Experience. It's your girl, Lori, and as I am recording this, it is snowing, and I love the snow so much. And it kind of like intermittently snows here. You know, they're like, it's going to snow and you get a dusting to like 2 inches if you're lucky. We currently have 7, maybe 8 inches, and it is still snowing for probably another inch. I am beyond excited, and where I record the podcast is right by the window. So I'm really excited. I know for some of you, all of my amazing listeners in the Southern Hemisphere, like Australia, you guys are probably blazing hot right now, which is just, the weather is just such an interesting thing for me. If I would have probably chosen many, many years ago, I would have probably been a meteorologist, and I'm not even being dramatic about it. I love the weather. I have no idea why. It's just kind of my jam. So I cannot wait to talk to you about this topic. It is a massive specialty of mine and something that I would dare to say most of us are struggling with. I went through this a lot, by the way, emotional manipulation, right? My dad was an alcoholic. There were a lot of people. I was born in the 70s, 71. And this was not a time for therapy. This was not a time for boundaries. That wasn't what happened. So there was so much emotional manipulation, but it's not like you know that. You're not 19 or 20 in that time and go, well, this is emotional manipulation. And quite frankly, in 2025, you may still not realize, or you may question yourself, is this emotional manipulation? And sometimes you're the one doing it. So this is where you have to take accountability without beating yourself up. We're going to go back to last week's podcast on forgiveness. We're not going to beat ourselves up. We're just going to create awareness. Over on Patreon, I did such a good worksheet. I really got in some detail in there to help you guard yourself against it, arm yourself against it, but really look at it from like the 10,000 feet bird's eye view. So you can see it for what it is with the people around you. And unfortunately, sometimes the people who are the people who are doing this for you are kind of the closest. And it's not all purposeful. So jump over to Patreon. It's patreon.com/the positivity experience. And that's where you can get the worksheet. So, and total side note, if you want to get on the mailing list for the free, I'm going to call it a workbook. It's 10 pages. It's hardly a workbook, but let's go with it. On letting go, there is an email list. If you want to get on that, I will email it to you and we can go for there. It's a free little workbook and you can get that. The website is thepositivity.experience.com, or you can just click it anywhere you're getting the show notes or show now. It's in the show notes in the description. So I really want to talk to you about it. So before we get into this, I need to do a little PSA for you. This is going to also be something that you might be doing, or you've been on the other side of it, or both. This is not for you to say, oh, I can't believe this. I went through this and they're not sympathetic or empathetic to the fact that I'm falling victim due to my childhood, or I'm inflicting this due to things I went through. No one is blaming anyone. It's about awareness. You cannot make changes in your life unless two things. You're willing to be aware, so you're willing to take the accountability for your actions, and or permissive, because you might not be in this part of your healing, by the way. So you might still permiss these things because you're like, I don't know how to do this. I'm still in people pleasing. I'm still in my trauma. I don't know how to get through this. So you got to be empathetic to yourself, but you do have to be aware without blaming yourself or thinking you're a bad person. So I wanted to get that out of the way because there's going to be some conversation about manipulative behaviors. So I just want you to hear it from a place of awareness and observation, not to adhere to it, to take it so personal. All right. Either way. So it's guarding yourself against this emotional manipulation. So many people in this world that you encounter are manipulative. So many. And again, could be you. But not everybody who's manipulative is sitting with their paper and pen and they're like, I'm going to take over the world. I'm going to make them do whatever I want. Some manipulation is not intentional. So be aware of that. That does not mean it's a free pass for people to continue the cycle for you, but you just have to be aware that not everybody is intentionally doing it. And some people are in attachment. Some people are in insecure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment. So the manipulation comes with that. But again, it's unintentional, but there's a fine line because at some point it does become intentional because they're aware of it. And then they go, well, I'm just not going to make a change. Well, that's intentional. So that's why I said it's a really fine line. And there's psychological principles of manipulation. Why is it, right? So you got to know the script. You got to know the formula. People don't just wake up and go, I think I'm going to be manipulative today. It's cognitive dissonance. And I have an entire podcast and worksheet on cognitive dissonance. Highly recommend it because that's where your actions and your words are not really in alignment. So it creates this paralyzation for you. So I highly recommend it. But it's creating discomfort between beliefs and actions. Beliefs and actions. So that's influencing behavior. So really think about this. You ever see somebody and they go, let me see, let's think of something in real time. We're in the new year, right? So let's say it's somebody who says, I'm going to go get in shape. Whatever that means to you, I'm going to go get in shape. And you're like, okay, first of all, if you're getting in shape with no plan, no real goal, and if you're doing it for just aesthetic reasons, that's already an incorrect way of setting it. And it's not going to be something that you can maintain. But let's say the person goes, that's it. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to do this. And then you see that they're very sedentary. They're not incorporating some healthy options, not going like black and white. And you're seeing this, but their words and their actions are not matching. And that is cognitive dissonance. So it's creating discomfort between beliefs and actions. So I just want you to be very, very clear as to what that is. And then and I can never say this word, reciprocity. Maybe I did say it. Reciprocity. I'm proud of myself there. Don't follow me for English lessons, please. So manipulators do something seemingly nice to create this obligation. And I know you know people like this. It could be your parent. It could be a friend. It could be anybody. And if you follow me on any other socials or you do sessions with me, you already know this. If you are going to do something with an idea that someone is obligated to you, you are being manipulative unless you word it. So if you don't tell somebody ahead of time and you just assume that they're going to owe you, that can go into manipulation. However, if you're like, yeah, I can help you, but I am going to need you to help me here. Or, I can do this, but in the future, I'm going to need some help. That's not manipulative. That's direct. Now, you don't always have to have a this and that. It doesn't have to be some equal thing where if I do this, you do this, tit for tat. But if you're not voicing it, that's what's happening. I did this. I expect you to do the same thing. We're not going to do that. Fear and guilt. Manipulators leverage emotions to control others by evoking fear, guilt, and shame. This is a common one. I feel like a lot of these but sometimes you have to hear it over and over again, but you have to be willing to hear it, not just listen to it. You can listen to things, but not hear it. Okay. This is sometimes what you'll see. Have you ever heard somebody go, they're not hearing me? They're not hearing me. That's not always what somebody means. They don't mean they're not hearing me. It means they're not changing. So it goes into that weird sort of, this is what I'm saying, but this is what I mean. And you might not even realize that. They're not hearing me, but that just means that you're upset because they're not making a change and they don't have to. Again, awareness is going to help you so much. Now there's behavioral patterns, gaslighting. Now these are going to be common ones. And every single one of these in the triangulation, I think I have coming up in the near future, but every one of these, there's a podcast that's exclusively for this specific topic. Gaslighting is a big one. Guarantee you see this everywhere you are, and social media can be hell. I do not scroll social media unintentionally. I'm going to get a crochet. pattern. I'm going to get a recipe. I'm going to get something that I'm going on intentionally for. I will not scroll for the sake of scrolling because number one, it's a time suck. It's a distractor. And sometimes you're going to you're going to go into a confirmation bias. You're only going to track down things that you believe in versus things that you're just like, let me be open-minded. Doesn't mean I got to change, but let me see this. And then in those comments, you're going to see tons of gaslighting. Oh, that's not really how you feel. It's distorting your reality to make you question your perceptions and memory. That can happen on social media, that can happen at work, and that can most definitely happen in your personal life. Distorting your reality. I'm going to make you feel as though, did that happen? I'm not sure if did it? No, maybe I'm overthinking it. So it's creating this where your memory is questioned. Your memory is being put on display of being incorrect. And this is something that you're going to see all the time. You ever have somebody go, well, that's not how you feel. Oh, okay. Well, you don't know how I feel. Feelings aren't facts, but you don't know how I feel. And this goes into the next one, which is projection. Projection is a key for this. It's accusing other people of the behavior of the manipulator. So it's blaming the other person for the actions that the manipulator is presenting. So if a manipulator is engaging in it, it's got to be you that's doing it. Well, you're the one that's doing this. No, you're the one doing this. That's a little bit different than the other projection, because I did a whole podcast on projection. Often we will project. This doesn't have anything to do with manipulation for a minute, but just kind of go with it for a second. I'm going to deviate. When people project, let's say somebody's been through a bad relationship or bad childhood or whatever the case may be, and you see someone else going through something similar, that's where you project how you felt, how you would feel. So you are projecting. Now you have to be careful because that can go into control. Well, I need to save them from themselves. You do not need to save them from themselves. And if you are the one that's manipulating, intentionally or unintentionally, you're trying to get something from it, because people pleasing is manipulation. And I'll go into that here shortly. And I have, again, podcasts on that. And again, doesn't have to be intentional. But when you are trying to get something for something, and I'm going to tell you right now, projection can be that. I need to control this narrative. I need to stand here. I need to save you. And then the other person doesn't reciprocate or they don't respond the way somebody thinks. Now they become the victim. Well, I was just trying to help. Well, I didn't ask for your help. It's one thing if you ask, hey, I really need guidance. I'm not sure how to navigate this. Can you please help me? Okay, well then step in. That doesn't always mean people are going to take those words either. You have to kind of know those boundaries. But if you are projecting anything and someone doesn't respond accordingly, now you're getting your feelings hurt. So that's where you have to check yourself a little bit and say, am I expecting me out of them, or am I expecting this big gratitude of saving me from it? So there is a little level of manipulation, but projection is where you are accusing the other person of the behavior of the manipulator. You'll see this a lot. Now this one, I know a lot of you are going through it right now because we are working on that in our sessions, and that's triangulation. I promise you it's coming, a whole podcast on it. Triangulation. They are using a third party to create confusion and competition. So this is where, let's say your mom, you have a sibling, and your mom is calling your sibling to try to get them on their side and pitting that person against you to make them kind of see like, oh, well, maybe it is that person. And in turn, doing the same exact thing to you so they can get the response in which they seek. People will do this when they are spiraling. So triangulation is very real, and it is something that many people deal with. And that's where you have to call that on the carpet. Okay, you might not be there yet, so I'm not asking you to engage in this quite yet. But there's going to come a point in time where you have to address it. I am not going to have a third party coming into this conversation. This is something for you and I to work through. Or, hey, I see what you're trying to do, and it's just not going to work here, and I'm not interested in engaging in these types of conversation. That's why I said some of you are not quite ready for that, because when we are addressing things and we are addressing them at the head, you're going to have to be assertive. You're going to have to be assertive. And you got to be confident in it. You can't say that while looking down, slumpy shoulders, trying to engage in like, well, I mean, I'm not going to allow that to happen. So that's okay. You might not be there yet. That's fine. But arm yourself with weapons. And when I say weapons against it, meaning you are guarding yourself against it. You have this then in your arsenal that you can use. Build that up before you start getting assertive. Because if you're assertive and you have no tools, well, then you're just going to seem unstable and you're not going to stick to it. And then a person realizes that you're not consistent. Then if you're not consistent, they know your patterns. If they know your patterns and you try to get serious, they're going to be like, oh God, they are going through this thing where we've been here a million times. They're going to get through it. So now it creates that pattern shift. Triangulation is extremely relevant. Because you're going to see this. And it doesn't even have to just be family. It can be people at work. It can literally be people at work. It could be friendship, anything. Triangulation is very real. And triangulation happens from a person who's trying to control and a person who's insecure and a person who wants someone to validate them on either side. But this is popular in, it's a little different from triangulation, but kind of the same, where you have somebody who's always in the drama, but not in the drama. They're on the outside of the drama. So they're like, oh my God, like I don't like drama. But yet they're always in the corner of every single bit of drama. And that's because they're talking to this person about this, then they're talking to this person about this, but they want themselves to look good. So they put two people against each other, especially if they're in jealousy, if they're in insecurity, if we're in friendship now, if there's three friends. And the one friend feels like they're always going out together. I'm never included, which by the way, they don't have to include you. You just have to get through that. And if that's problematic, then you have to address it within yourself and then put boundaries when needed. But you see this and you're like, damn, I don't like this. Well, but you had a conversation and they said, oh, she's being so extra today and I don't really want to deal with this. And now you have a conversation with that person. Hey, you know what? Man, I don't know what you were going through, but let me tell you. She was over here saying how you were extra that day. Why are you doing that? What is your angle? And then you turn around and you talk to the next person, that other person, and go, oof, man, she was not happy about you today. Now that person is on the outside, but they're in it. Well, I mean, I didn't say that. I mean, I was just letting them know. Now you're making excuses. So triangulation can come in many, many forms. Victim overload. Let's talk about what victim overload is. It's a big thing. Think about, just in general, think about when you go through something and you feel hella overwhelmed. You're just like, oh my God, this is just too much. So often you avoid, you just escape, you shut down, you don't want to deal with it. And there's something called empathy overload. Now, this will happen when someone is not in secure attachment. Just because you're empathetic, do not keep wearing that like a badge of honor. It's one thing to have empathy. It's another thing to overdo your empathy. So people with high empathy will often ignore, I promise you this happens, ignore red flags because they want to help or understand the manipulator. If I just knew their why, I don't understand why somebody would do this. There's no way. I can totally help them. Red flags are flagging. Those red flags are redding and they are flagging. But you are going to put your blinders on, because this goes into people pleasing too, by the way, because you want to feel valued, you want to save, you want to fix. And often we ignore these red flags because we can fix them. We can understand them. So in turn, we can fix them. And this is a problem. When you are in empathy, you can do so without taking it on. You can be empathetic. You can feel emotion for that person, but you're not carrying that for them. It's not your job to carry their emotions. This is very, very important. So be empathetic, but don't be attached. Yes, I know it takes time, but I just want you to be aware as to what it is. And when you have an abundant amount of empathy, it is related a lot to past traumas and over a period of your anxieties and your attachments. But just realize that that's why it can become a hard problem. And you're like, God, why didn't I see this? Well, you saw it ish, but you were like, oh, they're going through. Now you start making excuses, but they're just going through so much. Okay. Just because they're going through something doesn't mean that they have permission to manipulate or dump on you whenever they want. But when you have a lot of over empathetic responses, this is where victim overload comes into play. People pleasing. Let's go into that. People pleasing is such a big one. I understand it comes from trauma. We know where it comes from. No one is blaming you for being there today, but it is up to you to shift that behavior today. How you got here does not mean that you need to take accountability of how you got here, but you are here. And people pleasing is manipulative because you're trying to get someone to like you, not abandon you, not reject you, not leave you. And again, you're not sitting in a corner going, I need to manipulate the situation. I just want you to realize what's happening. Just be aware of it. Don't blame yourself. Don't get defensive. Just be aware of it. Because there's a fear of rejection, fear of conflict, and you're way more likely to comply. Because you don't want to lose someone, because you are afraid of being alone, or you really want this person in your life, you are willing to comply with the manipulation that someone is doing. Because you would rather have them make excuses for them and beg for them to change or fall in love with hope for them to change, that you will try to please that situation. And they know that. Do not think that somebody doesn't know that. There's a big difference with being kind and people pleasing. Big, big difference. Big, big difference. And when someone sees that you are jumping over hoops and you're doing anything to keep the peace, they can, not everybody does this, they can use that and weaponize it. So think about someone in manipulation. This is where they start doing that. Well, okay. God, I don't know. I guess. And now you're like, oh my God, did I upset them? I don't want them to be mad at me. I guess when I said no, I guess I should go because then they're going to get upset with me. And now you go through this high level of people pleasing. When someone is heavy into manipulation and they know that they're doing it, they will exploit that. They will exploit that. And then you're left going, I don't understand. I keep trying to do whatever and they just get so upset with me and they get so mean and I don't want them to be mad at me. So you keep the cycle and they keep the cycle. So they know, right? When you start establishing, no, no. And they realize that when they get angry with you or when they use the grandkids against you or when they do these things and it doesn't work, they are not going to like it. And they're going to double down on that manipulation. I'm going to double down on this manipulation. And I'm going to keep picking these scabs because in the past, this has worked. And they don't want to be without me. And they are, now it's appealing to duty. I am their mother. I am their best friend. I am their boss. I am whatever. And now it's this appealing to duty, like suddenly you owe them. And when you're in people pleasing, you're going to fall in line with that. So just be aware of that. And if you find yourself always trying to make someone happy, always living in a space of rejection, I'd love to talk to you personally, but you want to get very clear that that is not how you have to live. That is not how you have to live. And I'm going to tell you right now, if someone is conditionally loving you, I'm only going to love you and care for you when you're doing something for me. I'm only going to love you when you show up. I'm going to be appalled and you should be ashamed of yourself for not showing up. What the hell is that? That's not love. That is not love. Love is autonomous. Love is, I want you to be happy even if I'm not in your life. Love is humbled. Control is not. Control is not. So you got to ask yourself this question. Get very clear here. Are you willing to quote unquote lose them? Now they are not keys. You don't lose people. But are you willing to distance from that relationship for the sake of you so you can open yourself up to A, your healing, and B, people who are going to love you and understand. They can be disappointed. Oh, I really wanted you to come over. It's okay. You can be disappointed. But when people are withholding love or not understanding or trying to negate all of your boundaries, do you want them in your life? I don't care what you want it to be. I don't care. I don't care that relationship. I need you to pull emotion out of it and say, am I willing to distance from this person for the sake of my mental peace? Because attachment, right? Insecure attachment, it's going to lead to you tolerating manipulation. That's just, it's just gonna. Oh, you're going to tolerate a lot of things because now you start to evaluate your self-worth. Am I worthy? Am I? Maybe, you know what? I did a lot of crazy things. I guess I don't deserve this. That goes back to the self-forgiveness podcast. And I promise you, love is not conditional. Love is not conditional. That is control. Now, if you have two people in anxious attachment, oh God, no, that becomes hard. And then if you have somebody in a avoidant attachment and anxious attachment, that's hard. So you don't want to do that. And if that means that you got to work on your attachments and your past history and your past trauma, then let that be what it is, because you deserve that. You deserve to maybe distance yourself, to go, oh, I see what happened. I've fallen into the same patterns that I grew up with. Because that does happen. And there's a neurobiological bias here. There's a neurobiological bias here, and that is your amygdala. So we talk a lot about the brain, a lot of how your brain works. And I tell you, man, your brain is smart. Kinda. It is smart, but damn, you're like, man, why do you keep responding to that? That's not real. Because that's how your brain is wired. It doesn't know, let's say you're in fight mode or flight mode. Your brain and how your brain responds to things, it can obviously see, but how you react, your brain does not realize that you're not really running from tigers to survive. You're just avoiding it being hurt. And your body is going through the same thing. It's not, and this is where you have to stop comparing yourself to other people, stop comparing your trauma. Well, I didn't have as much trauma. Okay, what? And that doesn't mean that your body goes, well, it's okay, Jennifer. Let's back it up because your trauma isn't as bad as John's. Like your body doesn't know that. So whatever level of trauma that you feel, it's valid to you. You don't need to compare it. You're allowed that, but you got to be careful of not falling into a victim mindset behind that. Because that's a slippery slope. And when you're in amygdala hijack, your manipulation triggers fear or guilt. And that's going to activate your amygdala, and that reduces your logical thinking, and it also increases compliance. So think about confusion and go back to gaslighting a little bit, but think about confusion. You're like, I don't know. You almost freeze. Well, your amygdala is being hijacked, and you're like, I don't even have clarity on problem solving. Like you don't even have the clarity. So you're like, okay, now you comply because it's uncomfortable. It's difficult. And that's where you get the dopamine hits. I'm going to use gambling. So you're out gambling and you win, you're playing blackjack and you go in and man, this is your hot night. You are hot. You are just killing it. Yeah, you're losing some games. You're winning some games. You're like, I am up. This is great. Your dopamine's dopamining. It is flying. So what does that mean? You're like, yeah, it's great. You go home. You're like, man, I won $500. It was amazing. You're really excited about yourself. And now it's like 3 days later. And you're like, man, that was really good. That felt so good. But it's kind of worn off, right? The money went to a bill. You're like, it's kind of okay. But you're kind of like, oh, okay. Oh, let's go back to the casino because you're getting these hits. That's why gambling is a thing. You're getting a hit. It's the anticipation. It isn't even always the winning. It's the idea of winning. It's the anticipation. Boom, 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 dopamine, dopamine. So when you're getting intermittent reinforcements and then withdrawal, that's your addictive cycles. And a manipulator knows this, right? I'm going to give you just enough. You start feeling really good about yourself. Well, that your dopamine is kind of high. And then, you know what? I'm going to withdraw from that. Your dopamine's like, what? Wait, what just happened? Wait, what happened? So your dopamine depletes. So that means you need another hit of it. And that's just how your brain works. That's brain chemistry. That's science. That isn't opinion. This is science. Neurobiological bias is science. The reason that we are guilted into things and all of these things is science because of the trauma and how your brain got rewired, but you can rewire that. So it isn't always choice. Mostly it's not choice. It's the way that your body is and the way that your brain is. Now there are social and cultural conditioning. I have clients all over the world, you know this, and a lot of what I work with them in different cultures, in different societies, it can be pretty intense because it's pretty much ingrained within them that boundaries, we do not set boundaries. No, boundaries are nope, we do not do that. You have responsibility. These are your responsibilities. And that can become a problem. So there are social and cultural conditioning. So it makes it even harder. Society is teaching, this is in general. In general, society often teaches us that conflict is not good. You got to be nice. Don't be conflicting. Be nice. And then that's exploited. And don't think people, well, that's rude. The amount of people, they've really got to get a new script. Oh, you're selfish. You're rude. I can't believe you would do that. This is literally a script of manipulators. Oh, you're so rude. Well, that's awfully selfish, right? Because they're not getting what they want. There's literally a script for everything. There's a script that gaslighters use. There's a script that manipulators use. There's a script that narcissists use. They're not reinventing the wheel. And they keep trying things because there's a formula and the formula has worked in the past. So no one is coming with any new tactics. These are tactics that have been around for years and years. But man, they're not real to us, right? Because this is what you tolerate. I'm sure you've heard family first. And then let's say you have a family full of manipulators, narcissists, just all of these things. And you're like, well, family first. If that's not one of the most manipulative things that a person can say. Well, this is just what you do because this is what family does. No. And do not think that you have to adhere to that. And going back to what I said, are you willing to have these people in your life that you feel so uncomfortable and you second guess yourself and you feel so bad about yourself after you leave these people? Why do you want them in your life? Now, listen, you're not going to be able to just ghost out on everybody. You're not going to be able to just bounce out. So it might not be something that you can implement today, but you have to create this system and you have to look for ways to get out as best you can. And I don't just mean like in an abusive relationship. I'm talking about within the family unit. And obviously this is for adult kids. This isn't for somebody who's 11. But traditional roles or expectations in certain cultures and just in society in general, there's this idea that you have traditional roles or expectations, and that's going to discourage setting boundaries. So this is your job now. This is what you're supposed to do. Now I'm going to take it back in the day. Years and years and years ago, it was very role oriented, right? The man of the house went out and did the work, right? Even if it was back in horse and buggy day, they went out, they did the farming, they did all of that. But the woman's role was you stay home, you take care of the kids, you feed, and then the kids, you had all these kids because now their role was we're going to have 7 kids and they're going to go and this person's going to be in charge of the farm and the oldest is going to take care of the youngest and this is the role. So really think about that. You're not given an opportunity. This is just what you do. Now, fast forward ahead to 2025. That changed as far as being obvious. And, people are more, it's more fluid, right? You have more people like that. But there is this system. So let's say you have an older grandparent or an older parent who might have been conditioned with these types of beliefs. Well, of course, you're only given the tools and the lifestyle of the people before you on the beliefs that they had. This is just how parenting is. This is how life is. When you're teaching someone, and I don't mean like as a professor, when you're teaching someone or you're raising people or you're being raised by what the capability and capacity is of the person raising you with the tools in which they had. So your goal, if you're trying to break generational curses or generational ways of life, it's going to take a minute because these people are not going to like it. Oh, you're too this, you're too that, listen, the amount of if somebody's calling you rude, you're doing the right thing. Okay. And I don't mean rude because you didn't say thank you and you slammed a door in somebody's face. Rude is you didn't do what I wanted you to do. And I can't believe you did that. God, that's so rude. So you're going to hear these things. Do not take this personal. This is coming from someone who may not want to make that change. This does not make them bad people. Some people do not like discomfort and they're willing to stay in a situation. But if you step outside of that role, well, we can't have that. We got to bring you back. You're not allowed to do that. And this is so, so important. And that's what I said. You can lack education on manipulative tactics. Sometimes the education on manipulative tactics are just not there. If you don't have it, how would you know it? And then you question yourself, and then what's wrong with you? And then why does nobody love you? And why do you feel as though you're not getting the outcome in which you seek by these people who you keep giving and nobody's giving back? Because you might not have the education on it. This is just how we live in this world. This is just what we do. And meanwhile, you think you're crazy because you don't want to be around these people, but you're supposed to be around these people because family first. Do you see the vicious cycle? So no, that's what I was saying in the very beginning of the podcast. This is never to blame you. This is never to shift blame upon you. This is to give you awareness so you can make those changes. And that is the key. Education, knowledge. I don't necessarily mean book education. Knowledge is something someone cannot take from you. And that's why years and years and years ago, people would withhold education for certain people. They withheld education. We can't give you education, because that's going to arm you with too much knowledge. Too much knowledge is bad for us. It gives you a sense of autonomy, and we can't have that. And unfortunately, while those days are not as obvious and many of those days are over, that doesn't mean that it isn't still lurking in a covert way in your family. So how do you guard yourself against this? Well, that's going to be important because you got to have the arsenal in order to respond and not respond. You got to build awareness. This is, like I said, it's awareness. What are you allowing? What now do you see? And when I say allowing, this is a good thing. You are in control of shifting. This is amazing. When you put that accountability back on yourself, that's the power. Because if you're accountable for it, you get to decide what it is that you're going to do. But if you're holding it out for everybody else to be accountable, you're now a prisoner to their abilities or lack of abilities. So you got to build awareness. Learn your common manipulative tactics, which is what I was saying to you. It's the gaslighting. It's the I need this. It's the undertoning of passive aggressive comments. It's the insecurity. Work on your attachment. Be aware of it. Load yourself up with accountability. That is power, 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 power. And sometimes those people who you've been holding on to, maybe they got to go. Maybe it's time to roll out. Pay attention to the patterns rather than isolated incidents. So if you're like, well, they're not really manipulative all the time. They were just manipulative that one time. You're making excuses for them, and notice the patterns, not just one incident, because there's a pattern. Most people are just like, woke up today. This is a one-off. This was a one-off. They just happen to be manipulative today. And listen, again, I guess in some ways, there's always a certain level of manipulation that can present itself throughout the day. It can be, when you're aware, you will not do it, but you will be a hell of a lot more aware of the people around you. And the key is not to judge it. It's you observe. I don't judge people. I observe. I do not judge people. Before you go, everybody judge. No, I observe. Does this serve my growth? Is this what I want around me? If the answer is no, then I act accordingly. And trust me, I promise you, this was not me in the 20s. When I was 20s, not in the 20s. I'm not quite that old. But this is very, very important. And how do you feel after you interact with these people? Again, you're not going to be able to just avoid life and people in it. This is for people that you can actually choose around you. How do you feel? Do you go and go, oh my God, okay, I got to prep myself. Here we go. Like, is this eliciting? Or you go and you hang out and then you're like, oh my God, I just feel like I ran 74 marathons. I cannot with these people. Be aware. Be aware. And this is imperative because, again, knowledge is arming for you. It's good. Pause and reflect. You got to have self-regulation here. I know you're working on it. That's why you're here. That's probably why you're in therapy. That's why you're doing sessions with me. That's why you're reading books. That's great. But you got to take action. Self-regulation is grounding. I do grounding techniques with everybody. This is where you breathe. You're not trying to chase anything away. You're sitting. Maybe you got your crystals. You're bare feet into the earth. You're visualizing yourself being grounded. You're not worried about the people around you. Self-regulation. Self-regulation is a key. It is free, but it is the most abundant thing that you can do for yourself. Let there be a time buffer too. You gotta have a time buffer. Let me think about that. Let me think about that and get back to you. Don't hit you with the yes, I can. And on a more lighter level, you ever be out, maybe you have a few cocktails in you, maybe you don't, maybe you're just in a good mood. You run into somebody or somebody calls you and goes, hey, you know what? We really should get together. Let's do lunch next Friday at 12. And you're like, okay, like you didn't even take a pause. Okay, cool. Sounds great. You're like, yes, it's awesome. Later on that night or the next morning, you wake up, you're like, oh my God, I don't want to go. Oh, I don't want to go to lunch with them. Why did I commit to that? Be aware. So again, that was on a lighter level, but be aware. And even in a manipulative setting, don't just respond out of emotion or fear. Give it a minute. Take a breath. Let's take a pause. I'm not sure. You know what? Let me get back to you on that. I don't know that I can commit to that right now. And here's how you do boundaries without escalating into defensive-ness. Use a neutral language. I am not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with this type of conversation, right? Neutral, non-reactive, neutral. Ask them about clarification, or you do clarification. Hey, this is what I meant by that, just so you understand. Or I'm not really sure I understand what you're saying. Can you please clarify? Put it back on the other person. And obviously it's important for you to clarify. You don't just leave it all up in the air. But let's say it's the other person. Hey, can you just clarify what it was that you meant by that? Don't get defensive. Well, what do you mean by that? Just ask for clarification. It puts it back on them. So then they have to say, oh, well, I mean, I just wanted you to do that. Well, that's not clarification. That's their need to have you controlled, right? So when you do that, it really does help when you ask for clarification, or you're more clarified when explaining this to someone. You also have to voice your boundaries and consequences. People cannot just read your mind, and you not addressing it doesn't make it go away, right? The other person's cruising along. They're like, okay, but you're the one that's laboring and lamenting on this. You have to, one time, I need to be very clear here. One time, you say this to them one time, and you must be willing to follow through with your consequences. So remember, a boundary without a consequence is just a wish. Don't talk to me that way. Well, why not? Why? You think you might be like, oh, my bad. They're not always going to say my bad. So what's the consequence? So you have to say, hey, you know what? And I always use this example. Hey, I don't allow myself to be spoken to that way. And if that continues, if this and that, and if that continues, I'm not going to have conversations with you. I'm not going to engage in relationships with you. But you don't set a boundary out of emotion either, because that's not what we do. You got to relay it because somebody can't read your mind, but you got to have that, because this will not allow them to overstep. Always remember, a person cannot overstep a boundary that you are willing to hold the consequence to. That's why you want to be a little thought out as to what the consequence is. And it's not individual. Mom doesn't get a special boundary. Tom doesn't get a special boundary. We're not doing that. And how can you strengthen your inner resilience? Because that's a big part. You want to be able to have a strengthened inner, you got to have that resilience. Emotional detachment. Their emotions are theirs. I have an amazing podcast on detachment, live in detached. I love living in detachment. That is not avoidance. That is, I get connection, not attachment. I love my family. I love my husband. I love my kids. I love, love, love my cats. Love them. I'm not attached to them. I am connected to them. There's a big, big difference. And this is so, so important. And when you can emotionally detach and go, this is a story for them. This is something that they are projecting. That's helpful. You also want to affirm your self-worth. I am not responsible for their emotions. You have got to realize you cannot carry everybody's shit with you. You cannot carry their shit. Get out of that. No. If they're mad, they're mad. You are not responsible for their emotions. Stop carrying it. Because if they're making you responsible, attempting to make you responsible, and they know, and they know what you do, and they're going to get in, because that's what manipulators do. They know the cracks of the foundation, and they walk right through it. Ooh, crack in the foundation. I'm going to use this. You got to avoid taking it on. Because manipulative, that's right. No, I said that right. Manipulative attempts, that's their unresolved issues. Why does it happen? I'm just telling you. People are not always willing to take accountability for their healing. It's easier to be everybody else's problem but your own. That's why you have got to stay in the present. This is not my chaos to carry. It's going to take you time. You're not just going to listen to this and, oh, got it. No, you got to work on the healing. This is the foundation. That's why healing is a lifelong thing, and you got to have a good foundation. You got to arm yourself with tools, not weapons, tools. I mean, I guess in some ways they're weapons you're guarding against, but they're tools. You're arming yourself with the tools you need to work through this, to protect yourself without feeling defensive with it. So that's how you can recognize and arm yourself or guard yourself with manipulative tactics of others, emotional manipulation. And if you feel as though you do any of these things, remember, don't blame yourself. Don't beat yourself up. You've gotten here because you have some unresolved stuff that you haven't worked through. So just be aware of that and say, well, what do I want to do with that going forward? What changes do I want to make for myself? What areas do I need to work on? Because again, putting it in your lap gives you control over your life. You're allowed to have your feelings hurt because somebody's going to be in your life. You're allowed to feel some kind of way because why the hell is it your mom that's doing these things? But you must accept it for what it is. You don't get to change it because you want it changed. You are capable. You do not deserve to be on the other end of somebody's emotional manipulation. Maybe you need to be alone for a while because quite frankly, you're not losing people who are emotionally manipulating you.